John Martin, Lori Hamilton. So people are starting to come in.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, who's this?
I'm Vicky from New Zealand.
Hi, Vicky. You've got Joan Conover. I'm the host right now. You have John Ranahan from Ponape. You have Michael and Terry Batham. They're in New Zealand. You have John Hemblow. You have got Guy Chester. I'm hoping you know some of them.
I do. Yes, I do. Hi, everybody.
Well, hello, Vicky. John
Kind
Hembrow.
of like having a giant coffee latch.
It's great.
Now, Luke, it doesn't have his video on Vicky, but he's sitting bouncing around in a harbor in quarantine, arguing in Malaysia. He is not having fun.
No, I can imagine.
And we have 7.
Hello, everyone.
Who's in now? Stephanie Betts.
Oh, Joanna.
Hi, hi. Welcome, welcome.
Hello from Tahiti.
Get this full screen.
Give it one more minute and then we will kick off, but I am very pleased to have you join us. I've been researching all of the stuff that you've sent me, all of you people, or your website, once I found where your website was, because I'm in Virginia and more familiar with on the Atlantic side. However, we all have the same problems, the Atlantic side or Pacific side. It's a mess.
We'll manage. We go through all together.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
1 second, I'm going to get a pen to take some notes during the meeting.
We have participants have come in, and it is 2 o'clock, and my time, it is 6 o'clock your time. And so I'm going to start my slides. We have a sponsor, Nautatech, who is an educational system, and they've actually volunteered to sponsor some of the time we needed for the Zoom webinars. And
maybe at the beginning, can you introduce who's in the place so that
yes,
we can?
Yes, I will.
Thanks.
Let me do that. Let me go through this slide, and then I've got a slide with everybody's names. And 7 Seas, I'm the host, Joan Conover, and this is a Pacific conference that we're having. I want to show you on the next slide, www.ssca.org. We are posting all the videos on YouTube and on the SSCA website. On the first page, if you go in here, you'll see we're posting free links to webinars that we're doing. We have kind of a portal so we can stay in touch with everybody, peer-to-peer, some just history of everything from SSCA. And right here, in this area right here, that is where you would go. Here's 7 Seas University. That's where we're plugging in right now all of the videos and stuff that we're doing, because this is actually a new platform for us. And then we also have another one, September 30th, which is offshore sailing. It's going to be US to Caribbean. This morning we did the Atlantic side. We're going to do the East Coast US, Florida, Bahamas, and then West Central America, Mexico, Panama, the Pacific side, maybe December 10th, but maybe sooner than that. And then I've been asked to also do the Atlantic Islands, and then probably the African areas later, if I can do that. Now I'd like to introduce the people that are here for the webinar. Stephanie, you're there. You're with the South Pacific Sailing Organization.
Yes.
Guy Chester, you're the director of the Eco Sustainability.
Rear Commodore with the Ocean Cruising Club.
Yes. And Ocean Cruising Club has done a fantastic, fantastic job, both sides of both oceans. In fact, 7 seas to oceans. John Hembrough, down under a rally, I got to take my hat off to you. You're having a really fun season.
Yeah.
There's Vicki Moore,
Hi, John.
Astor B Sailing. Really appreciate. I've seen your papers. I know Guy Chester. He worked a lot with OCC, getting things set up. That Fiji Blue Lane, I think you had a lot to do with that. In fact, I think everybody has been doing as much as they can everywhere they can. Sue Van Velsen is supposed to be coming in from Picton. She's SV Heatwave. She's been helping some stranded sailors and doing some writing. A lot of wonderful writers there. Marina, Michael and Terry's daughter in Hawaii is supposed to be coming in. We do have Commodores Michael and Tara Batham, New Zealand. You've got SSCA lifetime Commodore Luke in Malaysia, sitting there bouncing out on his boat. You have our host, John Ranahan, Ponape, Micronesia, and with us in spirit, but maybe not in bandwidth, is Sue Richards of Noonsight. Now I'm going to stop the share, which puts you guys back on. And then I'm going to start from the beginning, alphabetically, or we'll just go across the top. And I would like to have you describe what you see is happening in your areas or in your areas of expertise. And Stephanie, would you lead off since you have the last name of B?
Okay. So yeah, ora now everyone. So I'm based in Tahiti, and I'm created a couple of years ago with people from Panama, Tahiti, Fiji, Tonga, New Zealand, and New Caledonia. And Wallis and Futuna is joining us, an association called South Pacific Sailing Network. And so we try to work together to develop and better entertain the South Pacific stopovers for the cruisers, and also to better inform them. So we do seminars in Panama every year in March to meet with them. So according to the situation, I guess that's what people want to hear about the situation with the COVID-19 here in Tahiti. So we have been the only place in the South Pacific that has allowed boats that were already at sea, gone from Panama or Galapagos or the west coast of the US, targeting to go to the South Pacific. So French Polynesia has let them get in. Most of them arrived by the Marquesas Islands. And we had at some moments more than 200 boats anchored in Nukuhiva, that is the major entry port. And they had to do a little bit of lockdown, but not so much because our authority did consider the time at sea. So once they arrived at the moment that was the worst moment in Tahiti because everybody was locked down. So the boats, even if they were allowed to anchor, they were not allowed to go ashore or really just with a paper and just for 1 hour per day to go shopping. But since end of May, the lockdown has been stopped. Now boats are allowed to move inside French Polynesia from one island to another one, or from one archipelago to another one. So it's better. And the issue that we have to face with is such boats that they had no place to go in the entire South Pacific. Now Fiji is open with quarantine, but that's the only place in the South Pacific where a boat can land. So that was good that our government authorized them to come, but then we have to face with another issue, is that so much boat in Tahiti that we've got issues with births in marinas, and of the population of so many boats at the anchorages. So this kind of issue. But we hope that this will slowly go better. Most of the, in terms of sanitary situation and health, until mid-July, we were COVID-free. But since we opened the borders, not the maritime borders, July 15. And so since we've got some case of COVID in Tahiti and Morea mostly, so we recommend to the sailors stay here with 112 islands where they can get in and enter or find an anchorage. So it's better for them to stay in probably Papeete or Tahiti or Morea. So basically that's it. It shows some lack in infrastructure to our government, which is good. Maybe we hope that now they're gonna put more budget in creating new marinas or moorings area. But it's still difficult in terms of, in some places where it's overcrowded, there are some issue with the inactive side. And yeah, well, they complain that some boats don't have holding tanks, so they're dirty the lagoon, or we don't have a place where they can drop their garbage. So it's not well organized. We were not facing to have so much boats. Now the question for the people in the industry is, what is going to be 2021? Will there be some boats going through Panama and trying to come to the South Pacific Islands? We used to have a figure in 1920. This year and the previous year, we had almost 700 boats arriving in French Polynesia every year. San Francisco, the US coast, the Mexican coast, well, 700 boats. That was the flu, the yearly flu. What is going to be next year? We have no idea. We expect 200, but that is going to be an issue for our ship chandlers, shipyards, and all of the cruisers industry.
Well, thank you very much, Stephanie. You know, I think it's important that everybody stays in contact and communicates. I think that's going to be the best, or one of the best ways to tell what's going on, and maybe encourage other, encourage the governments, if they get the influx of boats. But if they don't have the boats coming in, they're not going to be able to afford to do anything. Guy, what do you think next would be, from your point of view, what do you think, do you see happening? You've been working so hard with Fiji, with OCC, getting so many of the rules and regulations. How do you think we can help, all of us help?
Well, I guess we've learned as we've gone. I've been working with the OCC since back in April, and we wrote to the sovereign government, Tonga, Fiji, New Zealand, Australia. And we obviously, and that's not really a big issue, but we did. Still to this day hasn't let their own citizens back in that are in other countries. With Fiji, don't give the OCC or myself credit. We were writing to the minister, we were talking to the tourism department in great detail. We were presenting quarantine aboard strategies, etc. But it was really the agents and Cynthia Rash at Dinnerau Marina that got it across the line. It was a huge team effort. A lot goes on in the background. You know, we were having Tahani, that Stephanie would know, here in Papeete, working out whether we could actually get COVID tests for yachties to be able to do this blue lane, because it's very much critical on having a COVID test before you leave. And it's ongoing. 2 weeks ago, when the COVID was getting a bit bigger in Papeete, told us that they weren't going to allow yachties leaving to have a COVID test, which would have shut down the access to Fiji. That's been sorted now, but it's an ongoing effort. So I might quickly give you a summary of where we're at with New Zealand and Australia. Australia, we've been writing to the Border Force Minister and other ministers since back in April. We had what we thought was a very positive email letter in June, and we thought that allowed us to run a pilot. We have a reasonably high-level politician in the background working for us and advocating for us at the highest possible levels of government. And I can't mention strongly enough that there is political will to help the yachts in Australia, but not to make a for other access. And that's the issue, is how do they help the yachts and not make a precedent? Anyway, we ran a pilot with 5 boats and they were all rejected out of hand by the Border Force. Within 24 hours, it was just an instant rejection. So we've gone back to the Border Force commissioners and through our political channels, and we're now just with John Hembrow running a, we just closed off a list. John set up a form on his Down Under Rally site where we asked people to confirm that they had nowhere else to go. They needed cyclone refuge, give all their passport details. And that's going to the highest possible levels of Border Force at the moment. We only finalised the list this morning and sent it off. Am I confident about Australia letting those 20 odd boats that have put themselves on the list or any more boats in? I'm not, but I'm hopeful. All we can do is say there's a glimmer of hope. At the highest possible political level, they're saying, so we're doing that. John, you might like to chime in when it gets to you on this, but we've been working very much with John Hembrow, and he's been working with the marina at Bundaberg to get a COVID-safe protocol so the authorities would be happy for access and quarantine aboard maybe, and quarantine being the passage time being taken into account with quarantine. So we've got that in place, ready to go. And John's been working with Maritime Safety Queensland, and John and I have tried to create a rapport with Queensland Health, which are the, that's really now the authority that opens the border and allows quarantine aboard or requires a stay at your expense in a hotel. So I think that's, John can update anything else in Australia when we get to John. I'll go to New Zealand. Again, we had a really what we thought on the 26th of June with New Zealand from the Health Ministry, saying that we could apply for an exemption. We wrote, we're worried, we want cyclone refuge, there are boats going to be stuck in the islands. They wrote back and said, well, our border's closed, but there is an exemption process. We then were liaising at a level with officers in New Zealand Health, and very much John Martin, who I think's on the call, has been involved in that and put me in touch with some of the health officials. And then we've been advocating with them to have the humanitarian and compelling reason category used and enlivened. They finally, after we wrote to the Minister a couple of times, we wrote to the Prime Minister twice, we finally got the form uploaded so that you could actually apply through a form on the NZ Health site. But then at the same time as they uploaded the form, they put on the website that cyclone refuge was not to be a compelling reason. You'd have to have other reasons. So it was one step forward and 10 or 12 steps back. In some desperation, and only in collaboration with the Destination NZ Rally, with South Pacific, John Martin, and other folk like the chair of the Marina Operators Association, Chris Galbraith, did we go to the media. Some of you may know we did that on the weekend, and we were relatively successful at getting media coverage. We were very fortunate to get live to air TV coverage on New Zealand's Monday morning, and the Prime Minister was interviewed only minutes later on the same program, and she said they would respond. Whereas we can't get anybody to call us back. Yesterday I had a general of New Zealand Health explaining that didn't really want to allow anybody, just how dare we even consider it, but that we'd hear back from them next week. And we've also had personal emails from NZ Maritime, the Maritime Authority, as recently as today. So again, am I hopeful? Yes. Am I confident? Not at all. But I would say New Zealand's probably 50-50 chance at the moment of letting, 50 to 100 to 200 boats in for the cyclone season. I think Australia's probably a 5% chance of us getting any boats in. I think everybody on the call knows this, but we really are running out of time. Even if these border exemption processes are successful, folks still have to get a visa, and both Australia and New Zealand have been shut down, so it's a manual process. John, Martin and I suspect that we're going to end up with a manual visa process that has to be via an agent for the New Zealand access. And I'm sure there are going to be some cruising yachties that whinge about having to use an agent, but it looks like that's the only way we're going to get a visa process in time for people to be able to get the visa and then sail across the ocean. We're not advocating this, we think that's what's going to come back to us. And I hope we can let John Martin explain a little bit about what he knows about that, because he's more in touch with that than I am. I'm just going to say I'll just say one last thing, if I may. And that is that we had an issue with Fiji where it was very quickly announced that the blue lane was, but the government wasn't ready to process it. And so we had a couple of Fiji, and there was a lot of miscommunication. And so what learnt from that is we are only communicating when we have the local stakeholders signing off. So those people that see the OCC announcements on Noon's site, on the OCC's website, on the various Facebook groups, we've learned that we only announce stuff when all the local stakeholders that we're in touch with are signing off on things. So when we finally did announce the blue lane and announced it all, we knew that we could get COVID tests in Tahiti, for instance. I see Stephanie on the camera. You know, we did try and make sure that those things are in place. So when and if we announce anything about New Zealand or Australia in coming weeks, it's only going to be with complete concurrence of the local stakeholders, and if we can, with the government agencies. Anyway, thanks. We are still working hard.
One question for you, Guy. What about the America's Cup? Because New Zealand, they're still planning to have the America's Cup, the Prada's Cup in December and the Cup in February. So how can they get saying that they're going to have the Cup in December? We've got all of those super yachts here in Tahiti waiting to go to the Cup.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be very polite, but some of you can read between the lines when I say I'm disappointed in NZ Marine. We thought back in May that NZ Marine were advocating for the super yachts, the America's Cup and the little yachts. And I believed what I was told. I was told that it wasn't their top priority, that the America's Cup was their top priority, but they were working for the little boats. The first time we've ever seen any evidence of NZ Marine, that's the Peak Marine Industry Association in New Zealand, helping the Prime Minister saying that, yes, they would allow the little yachts in for cyclone refuge. And we got a letter out of Peter Busfield at NZ Marine yesterday, or an email. What they've done is they've set up a category which is for super yachts, or for yachts, they don't say super yachts, but for yachts to refit. It's not in the legislation, but the basic agreement is you've got to spend 50,000 New Zealand. And also the basic agreement is that you have to be sponsored by an agent or a shipyard, because the category is delivering to a business. Now, I'm here in Tahiti at the airport Anchorage, and I've just come out of Tiana Marina, and I know some of the super yacht skippers, and I've just been talking to a couple of them, as I'm sure Stephanie is. And some of them, including some of the biggest boats in Tiana Marina, are really disappointed because they're being told by their agents they have to put the money, 50% of the money for the agent or the shipyard to support them. And so one of them is being asked to put up $500,000, and the other one, a couple of million, get support by the agent. So it's not humorous, it's deadly serious, but there is still, even for the super yachts getting into the America's Cup, there is still a crisis right now where the health bureaucrats are the ones assessing access for the maritime industry rather than the marine industry assessing it. I think in John Martin's terms, the system is broken. So even NZ Marine for the super yachts is tearing their hair out that it's not happening. What we've tried to do is to jump into the space of getting the small yachts, the families and the couples and the single-handers off the cyclone-prone area of New Zealand of the South Pacific and into New Zealand, and a little bit of success with that.
Well, they should go to the Marquesas. It's a good place to be safe from hurricanes.
And if we do that, we'll have, if everybody goes to Marquesas, we'll have, I think DPAM has 440 foreign flag yachts in French Polynesia at the moment. So we'll end up with 400 boats in a couple of anchorages in Marquesas.
Yeah, I know.
You know, that I don't wish to be saying that Tahiti and Polynesia is terribly cyclone prone. But I do think we will end up with a little mini crisis if we do end up with all the boats having to stay here.
Well, thank you, Guy. You know, that's the same problem we have over in the Caribbean with Grenada. The Grenada is stuffed.
Yeah.
They can't go anywhere else. They're stuffed. And if one storm gets near them, I think they'll try to go like a flock of geese all over the place, and there isn't any place to go.
No.
Now, is John's, I'm trying to see, can John, do you want to jump in here? And then I'll have, then I want Vicky after
Yes,
you.
sure.
After you.
John Hembrow, you're asking for?
Yes.
Yeah, good afternoon or evening all. Look, I very much have been playing second fiddle to Guy Chester and the Ocean Cruising Club here, and my hat's off to Guy. The amount of conversations I've had with him when it's 2 o'clock in the morning his time, and the work that's been going on, and I know that that's only a fraction of what's been happening because he's been doing the same amount of work or more with New Zealand and the people there. So I really want to just say that I'm not the authority here. I'm just following Guy's lead and working with him to try and get the outcome that we all hope to be able to achieve.
I'm going to tell you thank you.
Okay, well, yes, thank you. I think...
And I just jump in, if I can jump in Australia without the collaboration with John.
Thank you, very kind. Just some Australian relevant information, I guess, for those that if we do have success, or the Australians that are trying to return home, and we have a number of those that are in Fiji at the moment, in Tahiti, that are looking to come in the next month or so. And we have a couple of vessels en route at the moment. We have one that left Panama direct to go to Australia, a vessel called Tahani Lee. And they have unfortunately broken a lower shroud, and they are having a bit of a tough time of it, and trying to redivert into American Samoa to get into an anchorage that's going to allow them to effect emergency repairs. And I don't want to be seen to be giving a plug here, but I'm wanting to make a suggestion to everyone. Pacific Maritime Radio, as someone who's crossed the Pacific myself and spent these time on these longer voyages, I can't fathom what it's like to be facing a 40, 60-day voyage, and all of the things that go with that, and the fact that they're shorthanded, usually a couple, the not having the luxury of waiting for the suitable weather, all of the things that we try and do to minimize the risk when we're cruising are no longer viable options for most of these people. And they're really having to go out into the fray. Without a backup support system, a land-based backup support system, such as Pacific Maritime Radio, such as Destination New Zealand, or whoever's going to be facilitating for the boats that do go there, should that happen, I'm fearful that there will be consequences for these boats and the people aboard them. And I would very much like to encourage people to have some relationship with a land-based facilitator that can, such as our guy Pacific Maritime Radio has done for Tahani Lee. He's been in touch with the American Samoa authorities. He's lodged applications on their behalf. All the things that are very difficult to do when you're at sea and trying to manage a boat and you're sleep deprived and all of that. So I think going forward, if people are going to be making these long voyages, they really should be it would be prudent for them to have a relationship with some land-based authority who is competent and able to assist them to be safe in this venture. As I say, we've got the vessel coming from Hawaii. They were denied access to American Samoa after trying to make a passionate plea to them. It just wasn't an open port for them. We have got the opportunity to put in an application with New Caledonia to seek nothing more than refueling and provisioning permission to stop. And that application needs to be in a week prior to your intended or expected stop if you are going to make it. We are suggesting to all those Australian boats that are coming from Fiji and Tahiti that they put in that application regardless of whether they know if they're going to need it or not, to have that as a get out of jail, and at least have been approved to do that. So that is available through a couple of the different agents there. Noumea Ocean is one of them, and Noumea Yacht Services are the ones that we're using. And those, they're certainly not exemptions. Those permissions are being granted so that boats have got that opportunity to stop should they feel the need. So that's a bit of a break on the trip if it's an Australian voyage, and perhaps even a New Zealand one, depending on the route. I don't know. That's not my area of expertise. The quarantine situation in Australia, up until recently, it was a blanket no. You will have to spend 14 days in mandatory hotel isolation at your own expense, which runs at about $3,300 for 14 days Australian for a single, and about $300,800 for a couple, and incrementally increases if there's more than 2 people. We have had 3 Australian vessels arrive over the past 2 weeks into the port of Bundaberg, and those vessels have been given consideration for sea time because, I should say 2 of the 3 have been given consideration for sea time because they applied for a quarantine exemption prior to departing, and that quarantine exemption can't be granted prior to departing. It can only be granted when you've arrived and they're able to quantify that your sea time's been uninterrupted. So people are saying, but I've applied for it, I haven't got it, what do I do? The important thing is to apply for it, and so that the Queensland Health Department have got record of your application when you arrive, because it could take 2 weeks to process these applications. There's an enormous amount. And by the way, the Chief Health Officer is the one that signs off on each and every one of these quarantine applications, as I understand it. So you could imagine what her desk looks like at the moment. It's important then to lodge the application and go there hoping that they will have processed it whilst you're at sea, and they'll be aware of your situation. You'll need to be able to prove uninterrupted sea time. So that comes in the form of some sort of AIS tracking or some way you're going to be able to prove that. We're supplying a methodology for that for those that we're assisting. What's happened with the 2 boats that did apply for it prior? They have arrived. They were asked to go straight into hotel quarantine and undergo a COVID test, which took 3 days turnaround from the time they were tested to the time the result came in. And at the end of those 3 days, both of them had accrued sufficient quarantine time with their passage time and the 3 days that they had spent in hotel quarantine to be considered out of quarantine. So they didn't have to serve the full 14 days. They only had to serve 3 and 4 days respectively. That's not saying that's going to be the case going forward. This is changing daily. It's changing weekly. It's changing monthly. And we can't give anybody any certainty of any of it. All we can say is we've got it in writing from the Chief Health Officer of Australia, of Queensland, I should say. And I must reiterate, this is Queensland specific. People have applied for quarantine exemptions to New South Wales. I've got copies of them, and they are just blatantly denied. No sea time, no nothing. You will be going to 14 days quarantine if you come into a New South Wales port. I imagine the same would be for Victoria if anyone happened to be going there. So Queensland is really the only option in regard to getting any consideration towards sea time, and there's a process that needs to be followed. We can provide you with assistance to follow that process. I don't want to go on here, so I'm really wanting to just share what's of interest to people. If there's something that anyone would like to know, I'm happy to say more. Otherwise, I'm happy just to sit back.
John, thank you very much. I heard a question.
Yeah, what are the perspectives, John? What do you think? Like, is it going to be easier soon, or months? How do you see the situation?
Just having a little bit of trouble. I think that was Stephanie, was it?
Yes, that was Stephanie. Asking what do you see about the future? How is it going to be in the next few months? Do you see the solution being solved soon or a couple of months? Or what's your
No,
opinion?
I don't. To have any comment on that would necessitate me to have a crystal ball. The second, as Guy mentioned in June, we thought we had this over the line. We have a second wave outbreak in the state of Victoria that's seen that state go into full lockdown for 6 weeks. If we have repeated second outwave outbreaks of this thing, you know, it's going to change rapidly. I don't see a light at the end of this tunnel at this stage.
John, thank you so much. And it's so hard. You know,
Yeah.
I think boats have to make alternative plans. It sounds pretty grim. I know that we've got Luke, who is going to be sharing his rather grim story from Malaysia in a moment. I'd like Vicki to step in. And Vicki.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Thanks
Aren't you the cutest thing?
Sorry, my hair's a bit messy. Thanks for inviting me to come along. I'm Vicki and I'm here in New Zealand. I am a director of Yachting New Zealand and also help run the Women Who Sail New Zealand Facebook page here. So I was contacted back quite early on with some of the sailors that were stuck here in New Zealand who were a bit worried about what they were going to do in regards to getting their visas extended and whether they'd be sort of kicked out into the Pacific at the end of cyclone season. So basically everyone in New Zealand that was visiting here when we were locked down in March had a blanket extension to their visitors' visas until the 25th of September. So the sailors that are here have now been advised that they can apply for an extension to their visitors' visas for another year. There is another small blanket extension as well, but most of them are going through the process of getting an extension for a year, which will take them through to September next year and hopefully give them a bit of opportunity to make some other plans. So for the people that are here, they're reasonably okay, they're sorted. I started also early on talking to Guy and Fiona up in the Pacific about what we could do to help them. I used to work for a member of Parliament, so I've still got quite a few contacts up in the in Parliament. So we sort of tried to start lobbying them on behalf of everyone in the Pacific and the other sailors that were having issues. The problem here in New Zealand, just for a bit of context, is that when we did shut down the country back in March, it was quite a successful lockdown and the country was pretty much COVID free, and the only people that were bringing COVID into the country were those that were flying across the border, New Zealanders returning, and they were basically all kept in quarantine, but the rest of us could carry on our lives without worry of catching this horrible virus. So the appetite on behalf of New Zealanders for letting international people in across the border and bringing this virus in, even New Zealanders that were coming in, was quite low because they saw it as a big risk to the rest of the country, who were basically going about our lives, you know, freely and quite happy without having this virus in the community. So recently we have had a community outbreak, and it's still not 100% certain how it got out into the community, but it was obviously brought into the country by an international arrival. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of what the New Zealand community kind of thinks of the virus and the dangers that it brings coming into the country. The other issue that we've got here at the moment is that we have an election coming up. So of course all the members of Parliament Parliament's been dissolved, and the MPs are all out campaigning and trying to get votes from Kiwis. So their appetite to sort of help international people come into the country when there isn't much of an appetite with the locals for international people to come in is quite low down on the priority list for members of Parliament at the moment. So I did go through to the health department and ask them why it was that they weren't offering cyclone refuge as a way of getting into the country, as Guy was sort of talking about previously. I got a bit of a standard cut and paste response, but one of them was that the they set the bar to qualify for a humanitarian exemption necessarily high to avoid creating an unwanted backdoor into New Zealand. And the issue with that is that there's only at the moment New Zealanders allowed in, and a lot of families have been separated. So if you're an Australian citizen, you don't have a New Zealand passport, and you're over there for work or whatever, these families are all separated. And apparently there's been about 30,000 applications for families that have been separated to come back into New Zealand to be with their family members. So once again, I sort of think that perhaps the appetite for letting foreign sailors to come in when there's so many Kiwi families who are separated from their loved ones is also probably politically motivating their decision to make this difficult for sailors to come into the country right now. And if you put yourself in the shoes of a typical voting Kiwi who's not a yachty and doesn't understand what's going on up there, they're just going to say, well, why are the sailors being allowed in, but yet my husband can't come home? So I just wanted to sort of give you that bit of a background and context as to why some of those decisions are being made. So as Guy mentioned, South Pacific, there's lots of people working on behalf of trying to streamline this process. There is a process, but you've got to have a humanitarian need to come in, and so you've got to come up with quite a compelling story and a compelling reason as to why you need to get into the country. And Guy's working pretty closely with some of the people up there to sort of come up with these applications. And once people start getting declined, when we get people with a really good reason that should be in the country, they've got a compelling need and they're being turned away, then we can really start sort of going back to the media, going back to the MPs and just saying, this isn't fair, start thinking a bit more outside of the square. But at this stage, unfortunately, yachties are sort of seen as and of course this isn't true, but an elite group of people that, are basically sort of just wanting to come into the country when nobody else is allowed to. So that's the issue that you're up against, unfortunately. I don't believe in that, but that's gives you a bit of the background. So yeah, does anyone have any questions?
Can I make a quick comment? It's Guy.
Sure, Guy.
The TV 3, the panel in the AM show in the morning, while we were on and Jacinda was on Monday, they ran a questionnaire, little survey. It's only of viewers of the TV show. It was only open for a couple of hours. But we did get 68% support by Kiwis for allowing the yachts in, which I thought was pretty amazing. You would not get that if we did the same thing in Australia.
Yeah, so, that's interesting. And that's great, isn't it? And I think, when you talk to people, most people, I was mostly talking to sailors, everyone's saying, let them in. Why wouldn't we let them in? It's great for our tourism business. It's great for our marine industry. You're coming from low risk areas. You're going to be at sea for 14 days. We can all see it. It's just these people, the policymakers, who are just so short-sighted, and I guess they're just concerned about the knock-on effect, that if they say, okay, cyclone refuge is a reason that all of a sudden, families who are separated from their partners are all just going to go and buy a boat and start sailing into the country. I don't know, but you gotta, there's got to be some reason why they're making it so hard. So, I really feel for you guys. I'd love to have you in here, and I don't agree with the decisions, but sometimes you've sort of got to start jumping through the hoops that the policy.
I'll make one other quick comment if I may, and that is we have had one refusal, and that was of some people in their late 70s that are wanting to go to New Zealand.
Yeah, that's
and
terrible,
he has been a New Zealand citizen. He's not anymore, but anyway, we have had one refusal already.
Yeah, very sad and very short-sighted, and I'm happy to take that up with them and try and do some more lobbying on their behalf. It's easier, I think, when you've got people that are actually being declined to really start digging your heels in, as opposed to sort of not applying and not being turned down. It's sort of like you haven't got anything really, any substance to kind of start getting upset about.
Vicki, thank you so much. I've read your write-ups and stuff, and I'd like to stay in contact with you. You're a beautiful writer.
Oh, thank
you. Really
you.
And what I would like to do, I think Luke is still here. I know he's sitting there bouncing around out in the boat. I would love for Luke to explain to you what's going on with him. And at the very end of this, I'll play his video that he sent me. And then I'd like to talk with Michael and John Ranahan. But Luke is sitting there bouncing on a trimaran, sitting in Malaysia in quarantine in not a good condition. Luke, are you still there?
Yeah, still here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, actually it doesn't bounce too much now. Sometimes it bounces more than others, but we are all right. Actually, when we hear all the story in the South Pacific, I think we are maybe not so bad situation right here. Hopefully soon we'll be finished with our quarantine and be in the country. So one thing I like to do before I give a quick rundown of what's happening in Southeast Asia is just my own personal feeling about all those boats in the South Pacific. When we cruised through the South Pacific, we spent about 11 or 12 years through the South Pacific. The first 4 years we spent in French Polynesia. Then we spent a year in, in the Samoa, a year in Tonga, a year in Fiji, 5 years in Vanuatu. And we never went to New Zealand and Australia because of hurricane season. So I know that the popular thinking about cyclone season, hurricane, you have to run away. But I think there are many hurricane holes in all those South Pacific islands. And indeed, like one of you was kind of mentioning before, making a super long passage straight to go far away to Australia may be a lot more danger than just spend the cyclone season in a place that you feel comfortable. So again, we had some cyclone. We had one when we were in Pago Pago, and while there were 200 km/h wind on the outside, there was only 70 in the bay, and the 6-7 boats there, nobody got any damage. In Fiji and in Tonga, you have several areas that are quite protected from the seas that you can definitively be there. So all what I'm saying is that do not think that the only thing you can do to protect yourself from hurricane and cyclone is to run away to New Zealand and Australia. There are ways. So here in Southeast Asia, the situation here is that all the countries like Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, nobody let anyone to come in except very, very rare exception. But all the countries, nobody is kicking any boats out either. So like somebody mentioned, if your visa is expired, either all the boats are blanketed with no visa needed for 3 or 4 months until the situation goes back, but nobody is kicked out. So I would consider, so that's why all the boats here, nobody is moving. Some places like in Thailand or Malaysia, once you are in, you can eventually move from one area to the other in the same country. Some other places, we were in Sabang in Indonesia up to a few days ago. All the boats were there confined in one area. And actually we had 3 months of quarantine on our boat when we were there, only because people get scared and everything, and so they didn't want the yachty to go ashore. And for 3 months we were on our boat, and once a week we could go ashore, one of us on a government facility, just to get our food and everything from some agents. So but we actually didn't do too bad. After a while, we could go ashore, you know, with the social distancing, the mask and everything. So all those boats, actually the people that are on their boats are maybe more lucky than the one that went back to the home country and they cannot come back to their boats. Some boats have been having things stolen off. Some people are worrying about their boat that they just anchored, thinking they will be back a few weeks later. So I would say that's the situation here in Southeast Asia. Everybody kind of stay put. Try to do the best in the country you are. And if in the South Pacific, Fiji, Tonga, Vanuatu, French Polynesia, if the local authority let you stay in the country for a while, I would seriously thinking about that and picking up a place where I feel comfortable. And once you are there for a while, you just wait and maybe postpone your plan until next year. That's all what I have to say.
Luke, would you please share what happened to you going into Malaysia?
Well, I don't want to go too much in detail or whatever. The thing is, okay, what you have to do, we needed to come back to Malaysia because we have a boat part here for several months. We have also repair to do on the boat. And so we just wrote a letter to the head of immigration explaining our particular situation. We had our Belgian embassy, they kind of vouch a little bit for us, so that could help. And surprisingly, we got the authorization to come. Now, when we came here, that was a different story because things are changing, like some of you mentioned, every month, every week, every day. And we just happened to come after a new regulation was in place that same day, banning 23 nations to come in Malaysia. Now that kind of backfires on the politician because a lot of the factories here in Malaysia are depending from foreigners from those 23 countries to either install equipment or to certify equipment. So today, just a few days later, I guess the government made some amendments in the law and they will let in some people they are related to work permit and factory thing and everything. So they you know, when they make those blanket laws, eventually there are so many people in different situations that they somehow come kind of backtrack. So that's our situation. So now we are still in limbo. We are doing a quarantine on the boat. Hopefully they will let us finish our quarantine on the boat because otherwise they wanted to take us ashore in a government facility, what doesn't make any sense because it's much safer for the locals to let us on the boat and easier with us, with our dogs and with some boat leaks that we have and some projects on the boat. So, but anyway, that's, don't want to make it long for our situation, but I think mostly everyone sit tight. And the thing is, there are some nice people out there. I think the big problem with the bureaucracy, not just here, but everywhere around the world, is that most bureaucrats are humans, but they are also covering their ass. And the order comes from way up, and nobody wants to take any responsibility. So they want to apply the law because it's the law, because they are not going to risk their future career in order to have compassion for a few yachts and everything that they will never see again. So sometimes they can close their eyes maybe on something, or they can arrange the thing, but it's fairly rare. So my recommendation, if you have really a compelling case, go directly for the big shot, the big kahuna there on top, explain your situation very clearly on a personal level, and then just hope that that person has a little bit compassion and make him realize what there is to win also for himself and the government. Don't only think about yourself and everything, think about the other point of view, because everybody is under stress, and politicians, bureaucrats and everything have a lot of pressure, and they are thinking about their future too. So yeah, it's a really crazy time, and I guess it's the time to help each other and to do the best we can, and hopefully we all learn about of this whole pandemic, and maybe we get out of it at some point. We definitively need to, so hopefully we all wake up and we each do what we can where we are, like we are doing now.
Luke, thank you. And at the end of this broadcast, I'll play your video that you sent me. Guy asked Fiona Jones to say a word. Fiona, you're on. I made you a panelist so you could say, we can say hello and thank you.
Okay, well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It's all being said, really. We're working together. John Hembrow and Guy Chester are doing most of the work on the ground there. I'm just back up from the UK, really, and I think they've both come across very well. And I know that John Martin's also around, so he's also helping us out. I'm really just facilitating and emailing and things. It's Guy and John Hembrow and John Martin that are doing most of the work.
Well, excellent. And you know, this video will be sent to you all so you can forward it around. I think it's very helpful for people to actually see faces and hear people talk. Now, Michael and Terry, do you have any comments?
Well, I think that most of the points have been covered very, very well. And I love to see that the SSCA is pulling together to address this problem. certainly a worldwide problem for long distance sailors, and one that no one's had to face before. So I think we're breaking new ground here, and I think everyone's doing a marvelous job. I would just also like to say two more things about New Zealand. One of the problems is that the government has only so much in the way of quarantine facilities, from what I've heard, and they've not wanted to overwhelm them. I know that, you know, you've been talking about quarantine on boats, but one of the problems in New Zealand is that we haven't had much actual, how do you say, transmission, community transmission yet, only a little bit recently. And that basically has come when people have escaped from their quarantine facilities and basically gone out into the community and spread. And so the government has been put in a position where everyone has to be in some kind of quarantine facilities that are secure. And so that's one thing that I just mentioned. The other is that we live in the Northland, where there are lots of Maori population. And the Maori and the Pacific Islanders are actually incredibly prone to this disease. And they are a population that basically has to be protected in New Zealand. And so there's more concern in New Zealand about COVID, which would probably affect that population much more heavily than the Pakeha population here. So that's another big concern. And the Maoris themselves will be putting pressure on not letting people just come in and then maybe break their quarantine and that sort of thing. So that's about all I have. What have you?
Well, I'd like to add that New Zealand is actually in the situation where we still have all last year's boats that came. And so they have not moved on because they were coming in here just before COVID started. And so they have already had exemptions, as I think Vicky mentioned, to stay another year. And so we're very limited on where new boats could be, where they could be put, and where they could be secured. And as Terry says, there just isn't the quarantining facility for them. And I think that is the serious concern. You know, it's a small country, and 400 or 500 or 700 boats, as you're talking about, coming down here would, just totally swamp the facilities. If you take the people off and put them in secure quarantine facility, if that existed, where are the boats going to be put and who's going to look after those boats so that they are secure? It's a monumental problem of just overcrowding.
Can we make a comment?
A
Sorry?
guy wants to make
I don't think John Martin's up as a panelist, but there's been a lot of work done on this with Whangarei and Opua marinas, and there is capacity in a process to have quarantine aboard. The government officials have been looking at it. If John Martin's able to chime in, that would be great. But I'm not saying...
I've got the music back on now.
What's that?
Yeah, I got my audio back on now, so somebody's unmuted me. So yeah, I'd like to just touch on the quarantine side, if I may. We've seen a number of people put applications in for exemptions, etc., but I don't think any one of those is going to be approved until such time as we've got a managed self-isolation aboard facility approval. There's been a number of them put in. Auckland's put in one for the super yachts. Marsden Cove Marina have put one in, which has been declined on a number of reasons. And probably from the cruising yachtsman's point of view, the most likely one to come up would be Bay of Islands Marina at Port Opua. They're intending to put the quarantine facility on the attenuator, which is the breakwater, so that it's completely separate from the rest of New Zealand. And not attached to the land. So They're still working on that, and likely to see something coming through. They're going to need to put something in place and have something approved anyway for the New Zealand boats that are coming in at the end of the season. There's likely to be between 60 and 100 of those boats coming back into the country. But as far as the exemptions are concerned, we haven't had any approvals yet. We haven't had any declined as far as the ones that we've got in our pilot for both the business or economic value, economic benefit, and also the humanitarian side of things. And we've got some applications in for that as well on a range of different humanitarian examples, not just cyclone refuge. But until such time as we've got a facility approval, I believe Health are just holding on to those applications at this stage. Back to you.
Well, if I didn't hear. Thanks, John. Info I have, the facility you're mentioning at Opua is just a floating breakwater that is 2 boat lengths from all the regular moored boats. It's not very remote. I mean, it's a hop and a skip and a dinghy across, and it could only take 50 boats at a maximum. And you know, we've got, I think you just said, John, sort of 100 New Zealand boats coming in. So that's going to be filled and overflowing just with the New Zealanders returning.
Unless they're staggered.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And I spoke to the lady at the customs, and she said they're getting applications daily, and they're getting.
She said 2 or 3 daily.
Daily, and they're being turned down and refused. So I'm just saying, is nothing that I've heard is encouraging for anybody to plan on being here. I think what Luke said of securing in a good place wherever you are is a far more sensible outlook, and organized to get extra gear, extra chain or whatever, and be secure where you are.
We stayed in Fiji.
Yeah, we spent one cyclone season in Fiji. But it doesn't look hopeful because basically New Zealand is full as far as yachts is concerned. And I don't know what is going to happen with the super yachts in America's Cup. That's
may just be on TV.
Yes.
It's probably the best place to see it from anyway, on television. Just to conclude on that remark, there are a lot of people in the Bay of Islands, Marina, Farmouth Holdings, that have put a tremendous amount of work. I've been involved in a couple of the discussions there as well. They've had health and government customs agents up there 3 times in the last 2 weeks, and word on the ground that I'm hearing is that that's relatively close to an approval. So fingers crossed on that. I hear what you're saying about the tropics. I hear what you're saying about staying in the cyclone area. There are places in French Polynesia that are good. There are places in Fiji, but as Guy pointed out, the space is limited even in all of those places as well. And if we have 300 or 400 boats trying to find cyclone shelter in French Polynesia, that's not going to work. They come across to Fiji to ease that, then Fiji is going to have the same problem. So I think we're honor bound as Kiwis to look at helping these people. I'd also just like to say thank you to Guy, to Fee, and to Vicky for your help and support. I'd also like to say thank you to John Hembrow for assisting with the Australian side of things. And as John said, John Hembrow said, I think it's very important that the boats that are coming across utilize the resources that people like John and the Down Under Rally have to get into the country. So that's all I've got tonight, and thank you for the opportunity.
John, thank you very much. And Michael and Terry, really appreciate your comments. And I think it is common sense. If you're in a safe spot where you can hunker down, you probably want to consider that. I see John had a note saying it's important to mention, even though there's cyclone holds in Fiji, there's 2 things to consider: the volume of boats and unusual demand, and the availability of cyclone holds, and the fact the insurance industry is doing some reevaluation. So on storm coverage, there's some things you have to check. But if there isn't a place to go to, you hunker where you're at. Stephanie wanted to add, there's some good signs as well. Tahiti Moorea sailing last July, Musket Cove Regatta, that'll take place in Fiji. We have to keep the dynamics as much as we can. And she is in touch with the Oyster Rally, who definitely will be back in 2022, so there's some sunshine. And then BJ Porter says their insurance is a big limiter also for people. Yes, yes, it is. And John, you've been so patient. John Ranahan sitting here in Ponape, listening to all this. And he's our cruising station host, Seven Seas cruising station host, very patiently sitting there in Ponape for years for us, and not getting a tremendous number of people there right now, are you?
Oh, we're getting absolutely no one. We don't get a lot of boats anyway, but the country is completely shut down. They're not allowing citizens back in. They allow corpses in to come in, to get buried, but that's it. And no family members are allowed in. No one's allowed off an airplane. No one's allowed off any ships. It's completely shut down, but we don't have any COVID. And they're trying to keep it that way, although they're talking about now, starting October 1st, bringing in, to repatriate some citizens on a list of almost 1,000 people, and they're going to bring 10 in at a time, and they spend 14 days in quarantine. That's all they have facility for right now here in Ponape. And after 14 days, 10 more can come in, but there are 1,000 people, so you divide that by 10, and you figure out how many years it is before anyone else is going to be allowed in. And that assumes, of course, that the COVID continues to be with us. There's not a lot of hope here. There's only one boat here. He's been stuck for a while, but he's kind of happy because he doesn't have COVID, and it's a nice, safe place. We haven't had a hurricane or a typhoon here since 1906. So, it's a good, safe place to be, but no one's allowed in.
Oh, John, thank you so much. And it's so nice to see you. And I see Sue Van Velzen has come in. Sue, would you like to add anything to this? I appreciate your patience. Sue, can you hear us? Oh, and Stephanie, John Ranahan is in Ponape, Micronesia. But Sue, can you hear us at all? See if I can ask to start video. I think she's here. Sue, can you hear us at all? Well, we'll see if she can come in. Sue, if you can talk, we'd love to hear you.
Her mute button may be off.
No, it doesn't show mute button is on. She shows video going. She shows she's not muted. Let me look again, but she looks like she's okay. So I'm not sure, it may just be her bandwidth. Sue, I am so sorry. I know it's difficult for you right now to come online. And I apologize. I hope you've been able to hear us anyway. Does anyone else have any comments or thoughts? This will be posted on the SSCA, and the link's going to be available. The recording will be available for people to use, copy, or whatever. I appreciate you guys, all the things you're doing. John, you mentioned the fact that we have the radio nets to help, or kind of a dynamic network of different people that are helping when boats are in trouble. You're having that, guiding that one boat over. We've been doing something similar on the Atlantic side with the KPK radio that SSCA set up in Florida, and then we cover the Atlantic and a little bit on the Pacific, but mainly the Atlantic side. And when someone gets into trouble, the whole network comes up. Everybody gets a hold of everybody and tries to help as best they can. I've gotten really good with the US, the SATSAR folks that do all of the GPS and the EPIRB. There's Sue.
Sorry.
Okay. I'm really good at getting with the SATSAR EPIRB folks, with the US government if there's a problem, even to tracking down old EPIRBs registration in different countries. So if you ever needed to know how to do that, I can tell you. You don't want to do that though, but I can tell you that. Sue, I am so glad to see you. Now, have you heard the conversation, or have you just been trying to come in?
I came in on a wrong device, so I finally got it sorted. But I do apologise. I was late coming in as well, so I'm really sorry about that.
Well, you'll be able to catch the rest of the recording. And can
Awesome.
you tell us a little bit in your area where you're at locally right now? What's going on with boats?
Very little apart from little local cruising and local racing. There's certainly nothing coming into the area. Waikawa, Picton rather, is a port of entry, but there's nothing happening there because we're not allowed. I'm sure Vicky has talked quite a bit on that and is much more up to date on the international side of things than I am. But no, we're all out there enjoying ourselves, as probably everybody else is in their own areas. But yeah, internationally, there's very little action at all.
Well, thank you so much, and I hope you'll enjoy seeing the video and maybe being able to use it to explain that there's problems, what people are facing, that it's not just in one spot. There is also a video that was just done tonight with the Caribbean that will be posted, and you will listen to Captain Joe Karpinski in Antigua and go, oh my gosh, they're throwing people in rat-infested jail because they don't wear masks.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, it could be worse.
Yeah.
So if does anyone else have any other thoughts? I'm looking at here, New Zealand quarantine for boats has been revised to 14 days taken from your departure. This is in order to reduce the time on the quarantine dock. I think everyone's just going to have to be very, very careful if they're moving around and where they move to, and if they can move. They do not want to be floating out in the middle of the water and not being able to make a harbor anywhere.
Yeah.
John Hembrow here, if I may.
Yeah.
I thank you for reading out those notes I brought up, and whilst I don't disagree with those that are saying that the opportunity or option to stay in the Pacific for cyclone season isn't available, all of the work that has been done to date to try and gain access for these vessels to come to New Zealand and to Australia has been done on the basis that they are looking for cyclone refuge. And in normal seasons, I've spent 2 cyclone seasons in Fiji, and in the normal season, the demand there for the cyclone protected areas is extreme. In an unusual season like this, with the volume of boats, there's been 70 vessels arrived there just in the last month, as I understand it, and many more on the way. You will not fit these boats into these mangrove creeks. You will not fit them into the Wunda Marina cyclone holes. There's going to be vessels that are going to find themselves potentially without suitable cyclone locations. So whilst in a normal season, this might be achievable and those are prepared to take a risk, in this season, it may not be achievable because of the sheer volume of boats. And if there's no other option, then this is going to be a catastrophe potentially. There's no insurance, and I know how heavily we relied on our insurance as a result of being there in a cyclone in 2012 and the resulting damage. So I just don't want to water down the fact that, you know, getting these vessels the opportunity to seek cyclone refuge in Australia, in New Zealand, either or, is not a valid and needed point.
Oh, no, John, no, they need to, if they can make it there, great. They need to.
Yeah.
They need plan A's, B, C, probably all the way to plan Z.
Sure. You wonder who might watch this, and we don't want to confuse the message. The message has got to be clear that this is something that is needed. It's not something that would be a choice. It's needed.
Well, everything's stuffed. I wonder if there's a way to keep some of the boats, they're going to be coming through the Panama Canal. They're going to be, it's going to be the season to come to the Pacific. I think there needs to be some careful thought taken. If boats can't move forward, you don't want boats, more boats and more boats. I don't know what the answer is for that.
This is a really important point. Can I just make a quick point?
Yeah.
We've been trying to coordinate and be on message for the access to all of the islands, from, talking to the Panama folk about whether we could get into Tahiti or French Polynesia and Australia, New Zealand, Tonga, etc., Fiji. I think it would be really good for the OCC, the SSCA, Sue Richards at Noonsite, and the other peak cruising bodies to come up with a formulated approach to next season. And I think it's going to be people advice. There was a lot of emotion about Panama or Mexico earlier in the year, and there are a lot of people making some serious value judgments of people that left or people that stayed, etc. I think we need to put a factual summary out probably around December, when we've closed the season, we know where the boats got off the Pacific, we know what the story is in the Caribbean, and then all of the peak bodies collaborate so that it's not, one individual person making an opinion, but we collaborate on a recommendation of cruising in the Pacific Basin, with the facts of what each of the nations are allowing, post this immediate crisis of getting boats off for this current South Pacific cyclone season. But, use Sue Richards, use her, which destination is open, closed, but allow they should leave Mexico or should leave Panama. Because I'm a bit with John Hembrow. I think we're 12 months or more away from sort of anything like normality. And, we've still got people that have just retired, have just bought their boats in the Caribbean and want to get them back to Australia or New Zealand. There's going to be people that think they've got to leave. And I think it's important that we have a coordinated approach to advise us to what the situation is between OCC, SSCA, Noonsite, and everybody else.
Well, that's why I'm doing these webinars. I mean, exactly, because we have the problem with the boats coming from Europe. The Ark is coming to the Caribbean, okay? Well, the boats haven't moved out of the Caribbean. There's only a few places you can go. Some of them are sitting in hurricane areas, so they're all going to head, I think a lot from what I saw this evening, they'll head Panama. Well, Panama has room, as long as we don't have any COVID breakout. But, they've got a quarantine. We're getting bottlenecks, and it is concerning. We need to keep them. I see we have the Ark boat stuck here as well. And John Hembrow is signing off. Good night, John. Thank you.
Thank you very much, folks.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Appreciate it. And I think, does anyone else have any other comments? I think we've covered it. I'm going to play Luke's video as a good night story. And let's see if I can play it. Let's see, this is what I want here. There we go. Maybe.
All right, a little update about the situation during COVID here in Southeast Asia. We have been in Indonesia since March, and I can tell you that the whole situation about the boat movement, entering, exiting country in Southeast Asia has been quite hectic and is still hectic. News are changing every few weeks. Sometime we hear that some government, being Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, may start to loosen up. Then the next thing, they are going to close down again. And so pretty much since March, most sailboats are pretty much stuck where they are. Boats cannot really move at this point between Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, except in very specific cases. So the thing to do is to try to write a letter to the immigration and health authority of a country, explain maybe the reason, and then on a case-by-case situation, some exception or some authorization are given. But as far as planning, many boats are stuck in all those places, either with the crew on the boat or with the crew back to Australia and the States or anything. And crew that left their boat are pretty much stuck wherever they are in their own country, with still no time frame of when they can go back to their vessel. So it's a problem because some boat left, some crew left their boat, thinking it will be for a few weeks, and they didn't have anyone looking after their boat, or their boat may be just on anchor, and they already have some cases of thievery. So it's not easy. So the best is, I think, stick with your boat if you want to take care of your boat, or have someone that you can really trust to keep an eye for it. But as far as all the countries in Southeast Asia right now, we hear about movement control in Malaysia. They speak about extending it until the end of March. Thailand has some rumors that they may want to implement a 9-month visa for tourists, not probably boat people, coming into Thailand for the winter vacation. But it's all going to be quite expensive, and with the COVID test done at a regular interval. So news from Southeast Asia are not that great. So pretty much everyone stay where he is, and I wish I had better news. The thing is to stay on the pulse, look on the internet and see things, and if it looks for an opportunity, jump on it. But it's not much cruising happening right now in Southeast Asia, I'm afraid to report. In case of emergency, you know, they have to let you in, but a few boats abused of the situation, and so now, by example, the latest news I got today in Malaysia is, in case of emergency, marina boats or what cannot go to the rescue or what. It has to be the official Malaysian Coast Guard, and they will inspect the situation. And if it's any kind of a BS thing or whatever to get in, I think the crew are going to be in big trouble. In Indonesia here, there have been rumors going for a few months about boats can get into Del Rey, Marina Del Rey and Nongsa Marina with a crew visa, but that seems to be unconfirmed. Maybe they get a 30-day non-renewable, so it's really not any cruising. Here in Sabang, they don't let anyone coming in. We have about 15 boats. They are on the other side of Sumatra, and they would like to come here to be more protected, even though they are completely okay as far as visa, custom and everything in Indonesia. Sabang here is not going to let them in from another place in Indonesia. So in Malaysia, I believe some boats are allowed to travel from one state to the other, but maybe doing quarantine again and with special authorization and everything. So I think you have any good reason. Thailand tourism is suffering heavily, so that's why they have some different ideas to try to make it, but they all listen to the same news about second wave and third wave and control and this and that, and so I think not much happening here. So I think you have more things actually moving, I think, in other places than Southeast Asia. Very slow, lots of people here, and people are more compliant. They don't seem to resist very much or anything, so that means government has a lot more control on the situation.
Yep, more compliant.
All right, a little update about the situation during COVID here in Southeast Asia. We have been in Indonesia since March, and I tell you that the whole situation about the COVID.
Okay, so that was Luke before he went to Malaysia. Luke is now sitting in Malaysia. But thank you all very much for participating. We'll, this is recorded. Luke is actually going to process it and put it on YouTube. You can see yourselves. And please share it. Stephanie, thank you so much. Fiona, Luke is still here. Sue, Michael, Victoria, thank you very much. It's very appreciated. And you all have a wonderful weekend or the rest of the week and the rest of the season. Sue, did you have anything to say?
No, again, I just apologise for coming in so late. But no, thank you for organising this, and it's, yeah, I'll be really looking forward to, you know, seeing the recording of it.
We'll do it again.
Yeah,
I think we need to do this again.
Yeah.
And Victoria, thank you so much. And all of you stay in touch. And SSCA will post it. It'll be there. There's going to be more webinars, depending on the season as in when I can manage it. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you very much for organizing this and getting everyone together. I think it's been very beneficial.
Well, thank you very much.
And I know you're in the middle, you're halfway into tomorrow morning, I think, by now.
Well, the dogs are sitting at my feet going, Mom, it's morning breakfast.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Well, enjoy your coffee.
Thanks for your dedication there, and have a good night because you must be tired.
Good night.
Thank you, Jane.